Hey everybody, welcome back to part two of our Marfa adventure. And this one will be called From Marfa to Big Bend and Home. And this is where I would say the majority of the excitement took place. And there'll actually be a little bit of show and tell at the end of this. Anyway, one thing I did want to talk about that I glossed over in the last video was the fact that there are a lot of burrs at the Marfa Tumble In RV park. So I know I mentioned it kind of in passing, but if you have a dog or a cat that you take out on a leash or whatever, I would highly suggest you take booties along because those burrs are everywhere. And like I said, this isn't grass, it's a combination of different weeds, and the majority of it contains burrs, some of which are very, very small. Um, you won't be able to avoid them, and you're gonna, no matter how hard you try, they are gonna get in your trailer. I kicked my shoes off at the door of the trailer, and if I had $1 for every burr that I stepped into in the trailer, I probably could have bought a whole tank of diesel on the way back. So that just gives you an idea of the magnitude of it. Eva was, and Eva was really good. I would pick her paws up if I saw her lift her paw, and I would get the burr out. But somehow they worked their way in the trailer regardless of what I tried. So anyway, that's just a cautionary tale. So if you're going there, get some booties. I think even if I were to kick my shoes off on the upper step, I think somehow they still would have gotten in there. But anyway, all right, so let's get on to Big Bend National Park. It was named after a large bend in the Rio Grande, and it protects more than 1,200 species of plants and more than 450 species of birds. And we saw a lot of roadrunners chugging through there when we were there. It also has 56 species of reptiles and 75 species of mammals. And what you'll see in the pictures is that we actually ran into some wild horses as well. Now, there are additional park activities that you can do when you're there, like scenic drives and these programs that are led by rangers that even include stargazing if you're inclined to do that, or if you're staying tent camping in the park. We were there when the government was shut down, so none of that was happening. The park does have a rich cultural history dating back 10,000 years or more, and then even up to recent times with ranchers and pioneers and miners. The Chisos Mountain Range is the only mountain range that is fully contained within a national park in the United States. So that's kind of interesting. Believe it or not, that park is 1,251 square miles. That's really astounding. And it has, as part of it, 118 miles of the Rio Grande running along it, which is the border between us and Mexico. So in 35, the United States Congress passed legislation that would enable acquisition of the land for a national park. So the state of Texas deeded that land over to the federal government, and then in 1944, it became a national park, and it is one of the largest and least visited national parks in the United States. So there has been a little bit of an uptick since 2024, but I will say when we were there, and again, granted, the park was during the government shutdown that we visited, and there were probably people who didn't even think it was open. So that may have added to it, but we ran into very few people when we were there for the entire day. So let's talk about how you're going to get there from Marfa. There's basically 3 different routes you can take. You can go directly south on Highway 67 to Presidio, which is a border town, and we actually did that one day when we thought we were going to go to Big Bend, but we got down to Presidio, and for some reason, Waze didn't direct us on a highway that would take us over to Big Bend. We ended up about 1,000 yards from the border, and it was like, no, we're not going across the border. Let's just turn around and go back, and we'll go a different way tomorrow or the day after. So the other 2 ways are you can drive 25 miles to Alpine, then you can head south on 118 to the park entrance, which is just beyond Terlingua. Lastly, you can drive to Marathon, and that's about 55 miles, whereas if you went to Alpine, it's only 25. But you can go to Marathon, which is about 55 miles, and then you can go south on Highway 385, and that will take you right to the entrance. Okay, so option 3 was the one we selected so that we could just move through the park from east to west and then exit out by Terlingua. And I can't stress enough how nice these roads are on the way to Big Bend. I mean, we talked earlier in the last video about how nice they were just going to Marfa. I mean, they're absolutely great roads heading down there. What you're going to see on the way to Big Bend is a lot of mountain ranges and a lot of desolate land. A lot of land that looks very much like it does in Marfa, where it's just basically very sandy, deserty, weedy. My understanding is the state of Texas owns a lot of this land, and they also continue to buy more property, and they recently purchased 353,000 acres known as the Brewster Ranch. So one question we asked ourselves as we were driving down there is, who owns all this land? I mean, as far as the eye can see, it just looks, very vacant. The scenery along the way obviously is very beautiful because you're seeing the mountain ranges, and Tammy's the main picture taker. So the pictures that you see up here are primarily ones that she took. And it's not unusual as you're driving there to see people actually living in campers or fifth wheels. And it's not what I would call a camping haven. It's every bit as desolate as you would imagine. Quite frankly, it's hard to understand how people can live in that environment. I kept wondering, how are they getting electricity and water? I mean, it's different. So let's talk about expectations before you go into Big Bend so you're ready for it. These are some of the questions you really need to ask yourself. Are my tires aired up and are they in good condition? Is my vehicle in really good working order? Do I have tools with me in case something breaks down? A little dog interaction there. Do I have supplies like water so that I could survive a breakdown if I'm off the beaten path and no one can find me readily? Seriously, you're on your own out here. There's absolutely no cell service. And when we were there, obviously very few vehicles going by. And since there's no cell service, you've got to be prepared to take matters into your own hand should anything happen. Now, there was a road that Tammy thought would be a shortcut going from the Rio Grande up to Terlingua, but after we looked at it, we drove into it a ways, we could see that this was really, and it would have been a lot shorter, probably would have been 3 miles versus the 20 we backtracked, but I mean, there were signs in there saying, hey, if you're going to take this road, you got to be really careful. You have to be prepared. And after seeing some of the ruts in there, I mean, obviously probably washout ruts, I'm not sure. A Jeep Wrangler might make it. I don't think anything else would have. All right, the speed limit through the park varies between 35 and 40 miles an hour. So it's going to take you a bit of time to get through the park, just getting from one place to another. Even so, the scenery is definitely worth the slower drive. We rolled into the park at about 9:45 a.m. on October 4th, and that was just 4 days into the shutdown. And it seemed like we were the only ones going there. We didn't, on the way there, I didn't see anyone behind me. I think I might have been passed by one car going the opposite direction in the 90-minute drive. But as we pulled into the national park entrance, there was an older couple, older like us. And they were facing the other direction, pulling probably a somewhat smaller travel trailer, less than 20 feet long. They were heading out of the park, but wanted to get a shot next to the sign. And I would have loved to have talked to them, but my main concern at that point was just basically getting Eva out of the truck to spell her, and then tried to get her picture taken at the sign. And this picture I'm going to throw up shows that, Eva's not really keen on having her picture taken. She's usually she gets sidetracked pretty easy. So having her sit still for a picture is not usually going to work. And that's why she appears to look somewhat frustrated in this picture where we forced her to take a picture with me at the sign. Now, surprisingly, being 4 days into a government shutdown, you might think that things would be a little dirty there, but they really weren't. Surprisingly, the restrooms were very clean, and except for the headquarters buildings being shut down inside the park, you wouldn't have known any different. My advice, if you're going to visit this park, is to plan for an 8-hour day or more to be safe. You're going to have 3 hours invested in driving to the park and back, and maybe more. And then that'll leave you the time you need to go through the park. We didn't see the very east side of the park, so that's something we're going to have to go back and see. And I'm thinking maybe that will be a little more maybe mountainous and like up in the mountains and maybe a little more lush, but I'm not sure. But we basically went straight down from the entrance and over to the west, to the Rio Grande, and that took us probably a good, I'll say 3 hours, 4 hours, something like that. It was a long day. So from the Persimmons Gap entrance to the Chisos Basin Visitor Center, so from the entrance we came into to that visitor center is 36 miles. So it's going to take you about an hour just to get there, and that was kind of our center point. And from there we went on to the Rio Grande. And when we arrived at the Persimmon Gap entrance, or I'm sorry, to the Chisos Basin Visitor Center, there was a lot of confusion on which way to go. So we basically, and we had a couple maps with us, but I got to tell you, the maps are like very, very basic. And so when we got to that visitor center, we weren't sure whether we were going to go left or right because the signage wasn't really very good and it didn't line up with the map. So Tammy got up, she went up to the visitor center, and we were kind of hoping they'd have like a map vending machine there or something. We could actually snag a map, but there wasn't. But there was a map on the wall, and she took a picture, and that helped us decide that, yeah, we had to take a right. If we'd gone left, we would have gone down to the Rio Grande as well, but more to kind of a resorty type place. Okay, so as we turned left and headed to the Chisos Basin, we had kind of a nice surprise. And I do want to caution you, there are some pretty nice tight turns in there, and that's why the speed limit is what it is. So be really careful because a lot of these curves are blind curves. We came around a curve and had a really nice surprise. There were 3 or 4 horses standing basically partially in the road, all side by side. And so my first thought was, gee, this looks like someone's got like an organized horse ride going here, but then noticed there were no saddles on the horses, and as it turned out, they were wild. It was just very strange that they were all standing side by, shoulder to shoulder that way. And we pulled up obviously very slowly, and they were not scared of us or the ram. They just stood there. I'll bet if we got out, might have actually been able to touch them. And then off to the side of the road, there were a couple more horses that were obviously a little more skittish than the 4 that were standing in the road, and there was a donkey there too. So that was kind of a nice surprise. So beyond that, we started to hit some pretty steep climbs and descents. In fact, one of the steepest descents goes down into a plateau that's surrounded by mountains, and it has a very Jurassic Park sort of feel to it. And as I mentioned, that was on the way to getting to the Rio Grande. And as it turned out, down by the Rio Grande, we actually found a place like right next to the river where we could have lunch. You couldn't see the river because the reeds were so high, and it was pretty narrow there, but it was a nice spot for lunch. And that was the spot right across from that road I talked about that Tammy had found that was kind of a shortcut that was obviously not doable, at least nothing that I wanted to try with my Ram. So anyway, so after lunch, that's when we checked that road out, and then we decided now we're gonna have to backtrack. We're gonna have to take the 22 or so miles back, and then head on over to Presidio. Now, one of the natural monument structures there in the park is aptly named Mule Ears because it looks like a set of mule ears based on its appearance. And we saw it from several different locations. We actually saw it twice when we were driving into the Chisos Basin. And then even after we had left, and gone by it and traveled probably another 15, 20 miles and started heading down another highway to Presidio, we could see it in the distance. So it's a monument that you're going to be able to pick up on if you're looking for it from quite a few different places within the park. And then eventually we did exit the park at near Terlingua. And Tammy had found a publication where someone had mentioned that there was a ghost town there. And she was kind of interested in seeing it. I was too. It wasn't really far off of the highway headed back to Marfa. So, we pulled in there and really, this is what I thought of it. It looked very touristy. I wouldn't call it a ghost town. I'd call it rubble buildings with some places where you could probably get a nice cold beer. So, if you're up for that kind of thing, great. Stop, get a cold one. If we didn't have the monster with us, we would have stopped. Tammy would have had, I'm sure, a margarita, and I would have had a nice cold beer, and then we would have gone on our way. But Eva is not happy to be alone. She's very good if I'm fueling the truck up. She's very well behaved in the back seat. And even if we, have the air conditioning on and lock her and we go into the truck stop, to use the restrooms and come back, she's very, very perfect dog, and she's a great traveler. But that is nothing that she would put up with, and she's not the type of dog that I would take with me even to sit outside at a restaurant, just because she's a dog. I don't think that if another dog came along, it'd be nothing but barking, and no one would enjoy that. So anyway, that's the scoop on the ghost town in Terlingua. Now, regardless of which road or route you decide to take back to Marfa, you are going to have to stop at an immigration checkpoint. And I got to tell you, I think we hit two of them because we had gone down that one day to Presidio, and then on the way back we hit the checkpoint, and then this day we were going back the other route, and we ended up hitting the checkpoint there, and they were just the nicest folks. We're very interested in what we saw, what we thought about what we saw, so it was kind of cool. And they were very tolerant of my complaining dog in the back, so that was really nice. And it didn't take us long to get through there at all. I think it probably took us 2 minutes, 3 minutes to get through the checkpoint. Very easy stuff. All right, so back to Marfa, we cruised after the checkpoint. I bet it was probably, I don't know, 15 minutes to get to the highway that took us back to Marfa. And little did we know at that point that the most exciting part of the journey was just ahead of us. So we left Marfa on Tuesday morning with our longest leg of the trip ahead of us, which would get us into Abilene State Park. And there's several routes to Abilene. This route was to Highway 67, then north to Highway 10 to Fort Stockton, which is where we fueled up. Then, based on the timing that we were up against, it looked like taking Highway 18 north out of Fort Stockton was probably the best bet, and then on to Abilene using Highway 20, and then a few back roads, which ended up being a little bit nightmarish. But anyway, that would take us into the state park. So that's what we did. We fueled up and then we headed out. And like I mentioned, this leg of the trip would be about 350 miles, and you can be sure with Eva that that's going to be 6.5 hours to get there at least. So between fuel and dog breaks, it all adds up. And if you've got a dog, what that's like. So we knew time-wise this was going to be a little bit tight. The park office building, and I was kind of surprised by this because I didn't recall this being the case before, but anyway, the state park office closes at 4 at Abilene, and I don't know if that's across the board at the Texas state parks. I'm going to have to look. But I don't remember it ever being that early before. But anyway, they said if you can't make it by 4, then you better call so that we can make some arrangements on how you're going to, where you're going to go, how you're going to, the whole bit. So, and that makes me extremely nervous. I do not like to roll into a campground after an office is closed. And it doesn't matter to me whether it's a KOA or a state campground. I like to get there early allows me to unwind, get things set up, allows me to spend time with Eve outside. So I don't like rolling late anywhere. So I was a little more nervous knowing that this was going to close at 4 and we kind of had to scoot in there and it would be tight. So after our fuel stop at Fort Stockton, we got on 18, sorry, it was Highway 18 out of there. And we started talking about all the weird stuff that had happened on the trip, the sensor on the way there, the air conditioning thermostat. We just started going through everything. And when we started talking about the wheel sensor and about how weird that was with the low 10 psi rating that wasn't true, we heard a huge bang. To me, it sounded like a shotgun. Tammy said, "Did something fall off the truck?" And then both her and Eva were up looking over my side back window. And I was already easing off the gas, and then the TPMS sensor went off, and I knew then was not going to be good news. And we were on this really nice highway, but semi-deserted, just like I told you guys going to the park, there was hardly anybody on the road, and that's how it was then. So we eased over, and then I got over as far as I felt I could, and then Tammy hopped out and directed me more over. But even with that, the ass end of the trailer was sticking out, and it never ceases to amaze me. If you're gonna have a blowout, it's gonna be on the side where you're gonna be in traffic. It's great. Gotta love it. Now, my first thought wasn't how am I going to change the tire, though. It was because I've changed plenty of tires. But this is really only the second flat we've ever had in all of the time that we've had travel trailers. And one was due to just pulling down into a construction area to get to a restaurant. And when we came out, it was flat. But this is absolutely the first time I've ever had a blowout like that. So really wasn't concerned about, changing the tire. My concern was more about how is this going to keep us from getting to Abilene State Park on time. And I got to admit, I am really surprised that I had a blowout because I've never hit curbs with the tires. I didn't hit any potholes on this trip at all. I am very careful about, avoiding stuff in the road if I see it. And I am not aware that I hit anything. And these tires are about 3 years old with roughly 13,000 miles on them. So they've got some miles on them, but the tread's really good. And like I said, I did an inspection before we left home and it was all good. And yes, they are Goodyear Endurance. And so, there were just a couple reasons that really kind of surprised me. But when I looked at the tire, and I'll put a picture up here, it's definitely some sort of weird ply separation that took place. I've never seen a tire blow like that before. I've seen the sidewalls blow out, but I've never really seen that before. When it happened, I'm pretty sure, I know for a fact I was going 65 or less because I don't push it when I'm towing at all. Surprisingly, I had very little damage, very, very little damage under the trailer. I had some of the belly tape, a very little bit of it got kind of shredded. It never got to the point where it hurt the floor at all, that it even touched the floor. It just kind of shredded that belly tape. And that's why I don't fly down the highway at 75 miles an hour, because if you get a blowout, the damage is probably going to be pretty severe. So at first glance, that was kind of the overall assessment I had. Now, I did find a couple other things when I got home, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. But the first thing I did was I grabbed my tool bag and I took it to the back of the trailer, and then I started looking for my impact driver. And if you've watched some of my videos, I always take my impact driver with me. And usually what I do is I slide it behind the back seat where Eva is. She's in a little pouch, and then behind that there's room to actually slide that impact driver in there. Well, I couldn't find it. And then I started wondering, okay, God, I was sure I brought it, but as it turned out, I didn't. And so I was doing things the old way then. I got out my long wrench, put my ratchet socket on it, and loosened the wheels. And I used my smart jack to jack the trailer up, pulled the wheel off. And all the time I was doing that, Tammy had kind of a bright pink shirt on, and she was standing at the back corner of the trailer so the few people that were coming by would actually see her and go around. I'm never going to forget that thing again. When I got home, I found it on the saw table on my table saw. So I usually make a habit of moving everything up to my bar area here in the shop, and then everything from there goes out. And it was just a miss. So never again. So after I got all of that spare tire off, I went to the back. I shouldn't say the spare tire. When I got the flat tire off, I went to the back and started getting the spare off. And then as I was getting under the trailer again, I turned to Tammy because I was watching the road as well. And I said, hey, this looks like a police officer coming up because it looks like there's lights on top of the cab. Well, as it turned out, it was a Texas DOT highway, I guess you'd call them highway patrol. They would go out and look for issues or whatever, monitor the highway. And I couldn't have met a nicer guy. He came out right away and helped me finish up putting that tire on. In retrospect, I probably should have jacked the frame up from the good tire because I was just about an inch off from being able to get that hub up far enough. So he just took a little weight off of it with his floor jack, and we got that tire on, and then it was back on the road again. All right, so I have to admit, now I'm a little bit paranoid as we leave, wondering what else is going to happen. Am I going to have another blowout? Do I have some sort of defective set of tires? And the other thing that bothered me too is I don't like driving without a spare tire. So that was really unnerving. We stopped a little way down the road just to make sure that we had enough air in the spare, and then it was on to Abilene. And one thing's for sure, if you watched part one, you know that I wasn't keen on going through Midland, Odessa because of the construction. And when we had left Midland, Odessa on the way to Marfa, the traffic on the other side of the highway was like standstill for miles. So I wasn't looking forward to that, but surprise, surprise, one of the good things that happened on this trip is we just flew through that area without any problems, without any stopping, despite all the construction. So after getting through the Midland, Odessa area, and we started heading down to the Abilene area, and Waze decided to take us on a little back road adventure. It would have been nicer if it would have just taken us to Abilene and down that way, because then we would have been on the highway. It would have been, kind of smooth sailing. But instead, it routed us off on some back roads, windmill-filled back roads. I've never seen so many windmills in one spot. And unfortunately, you could never really get a lot of speed up, because even though it would say the speed limit was 60 or whatever, that was good for about a quarter of a mile, and then you'd have a 25-mile-an-hour turn. And so we kind of limped along that way for probably another half an hour to 40 minutes. But the good news is we did roll into the park at 3:30, so we beat our 4 o'clock deadline. I've often looked back and wondered how much time I spent on the side of the road, and I told Tammy when I got in the truck afterwards, I said, well, there's an hour out of our day. And she said, I don't think it was an hour. I think it was maybe a half an hour, if that. So I don't know. It seemed like a long time to me, and it made me a little nervous getting to the park, but we made it. We got there in time. It was great. So we backed in, got set up, got the slide rooms out, and everything was well with the world. And now I will say we have stayed at this park one other time. And I didn't really remember this, but there is absolutely no cell service at the Abilene State Park. And I'm going to reach out to them and ask them if there's any sort of a cell tower going in there anytime soon. I even talked to the guy next to me. I can't remember. He didn't have T-Mobile. I think he might have had Verizon, and he said that he couldn't really get cell service either. But, when you're in a state park like that, and you're pretty far, we were pretty far removed from the headquarters building, if you had an emergency, or, even if you twisted your ankle or, fell and, hurt your hip, or God only knows what could happen out there, to not have cell service is really, really unacceptable in my mind. The only thing that came up on our phone was SOS, which means that apparently it can't find a tower for cell coverage, but it can find some other network to actually send a signal, uh, for an emergency call. So I don't understand how that works, because I figured if you had no cell service, I mean, how would it do an emergency call? But anyway, that came up. But that doesn't give me a warm and fuzzy anyway. So I do want to check with them and see if there's any plan for a cell tower to go in even outside the park. Because even when we left there, we drove for at least probably 10 miles the next day, and there still wasn't any cell service. But anyway, they need something there. I don't know what the folks in that small town 10 miles from there, because we drove through that town with the trailer and there was no cell service. I have no idea what they're doing uh, for making calls, unless they're on landlines. But I find that highly unlikely now. So that night at Abilene, Eve and I mapped out kind of a trail that was about 2 miles long, so that we'd have something to walk in the morning when we got up. And then Tammy had warned me right before we did that. She said, "You better look out when you're out there." I just took this picture right off from the trailer, and there were a couple deer there. And I don't know that Eva would do anything about deer. I don't think that really interests her. But it was something to be aware of. But on our walk, we never saw any deer at all. The whole 2 miles that we walked that night, I saw a couple rabbits, and I saw some folks that were getting there and parking their rigs, and that was about it. And when we got back, it was a really nice, cool evening. So we just kind of sat outside and relaxed. Eva, not so much. She was, we had her kind of cabled to the picnic bench, and she kept getting herself kind of wrapped around it. But we also walked the loop then later, the three of us, and Tammy wrote down some other sites that she thought would be good for a return trip. And like I've mentioned in the past, the Texas state parks, if you haven't been here in your travel trailer or fifth wheel or RV of any sort, you really need to come down here. They really are spectacular, and Abilene's really no exception to that rule at all. The only way that they differ at all from the other parks that we visited is that there's no what you'd consider a pull through. They're all back in. But we had no problem getting into our site. It was one and done. And there's only a few of those sites that have full hookups, so you have to be aware of that too. But again, there's a dump station, so if you're going to be in a site that's not full hookup, bring your poop wagon and you'll be just fine. I think we tried to get Air TV and were unsuccessful, so that kind of tells you what the connectivity is like overall. Now, you may be able to use your Starlink there. I'm not sure how good Starlink does with tree canopies, but I've heard people say that they've gone through canopies and they get kind of intermittent reception. So, that might be your best bet if you've got Starlink. However, like I said, not sure just how successful that would be. So the next morning, even I got up at our usual early time when it's dark, and we did our 2 mile trek twice around our camp area there. And again, really saw nothing but a couple jackrabbits, and that was it. And then we went back, had some breakfast, and then packed up, and then we pulled out. So this was going to be a really short travel day compared to the previous day of 235 miles, and the only possible problem that I saw with it is what I usually see when we have to go through Dallas, which is a lot of congestion and people merging and just almost getting to a standstill. But surprisingly, we cruised right through there at 2:30 p.m. without a single issue. And then finally the trip was over, but kind of the fun was just beginning, because there was some fallout from that trip. I did find a broken brake wire on the wheel ahead of the one that had the blowout. And I don't know whether that was related to the blowout or not. It just had come right out of the little gel cover. I think I did a short where I show those gel covers. I don't think I have any with me, but they're very easy to to clip the wires into. So I replaced the whole gel connector, and that issue was over with. It's exactly the same sort of connector that the factory uses. All right. Second thing I found was a broken skirt bracket. I've had 3 of these break for no apparent reason over the last, I guess, 7, 8 years. I was thinking this was just another one of those situations, as opposed to really having happened because of the blowout, because this bracket was, a ways away from the blowout. And now here's the interesting thing. When I got back and I found it, I thought, well, I'm going to call Grand Design and see what they want to charge for a bracket. They didn't call me back for a whole week. I left my number at the parts department and just said, hey, I want to, talk to you about a, skirt bracket. So in the meantime, Frank, my buddy Frank, and I went over to Home Depot. And if you go into like the curtain rod area, I think these are like Valance. I don't know, Valance rods. I'm not sure what you call them, but they are like almost identical. Now this is the outer one, so it's bigger and wider and thicker than the typical skirt support. So I used the inside one, which was almost a perfect copy, and all I had to do was trim it a little bit with a hacksaw and then pre-drill it and put it in, and it's perfect. It was $3. So I know when I had one of those replaced at an RV place not long ago, they charged me $30 for it. So hey, go on over to Home Depot and buy your $3 Valance bracket and be happy about it, because hey, you're going to save a lot of money. Okay, and so we talked about the underbelly tape. That was the third thing. That was not hard to retape. I did kind of a sloppy job on it. I guess I could have, I was a little concerned with getting it right to the edge, and so it made it a little more wrinkly than I'd like, but I could always replace it. But I mean, that is just, kind of protecting it from the elements, and it's fine. And like I said, it didn't do any damage under there to the floor at all. Now, interestingly enough, something that was related to the blowout is that the chloroplast actually broke around 4 bolts on the underside, all kind of along that, alongside the tire side. And, those are really, the way they put that chloroplast on with the tiny washers and self-tapping bolts, it's really substandard. I mean, because there's hardly anything holding on to that. And it doesn't take much for it to break through. So what I did, I ran down to the hardware store, a local hardware store here, and they had some scrap plastic, okay? And I just drilled it like that, and then I put that up under the chloroplast, ran my self-tapping screw right back in, and that is so much more area to hold that chloroplast up. It really is better than using those little bolts. I could have used I suppose a wider washer and done the same thing they did, but you're just going to have the same result somewhere down the line. So after I put that on, I actually went over that with a little underbelly tape too, just to hold everything nice and tight together. And so that if the plastic ever fractured, it wouldn't just fall off and go into a tire. That was my thought anyway. All right, then on to number 5, which was on to discount tires. I took the whole trailer over because after I had a conversation with those folks, they said, you better bring your whole trailer in. That sounds like tread separation. We better look at all the tires. And I did have the maintenance agreement with them on the tires. So I went in there, and their opinion was that the tire, even in front of the blowout, was starting to get some tread separation. So they replaced both of those tires for free. And then they went and inspected the tires on the other side and said they were perfectly fine. So I guess that was good news. Like I said, I had a bit of paranoia on the way home, and I guess maybe that was justified. And then number 6, Tammy was right. What we really need are some warning triangles to put out in the case this, ever happens again. It's something I've never really carried, but I should have. And so we've got those. So if something happens, we can put the triangles up, and then won't have to worry about Tammy setting off to the corner of the trailer in her pink shirt, risking getting hit. So anyway, hopefully these make it into the truck along with, you know, my impact driver. So hopefully it doesn't sit somewhere and get misplaced. So after all of those things were done, then I did my usual roof inspection and wash. And the next day I did some odds and ends inside the trailer along with a real thorough cleaning. And I got to tell you, boy, oh boy, man, that was so dusty and dirty down there in Marfa. And I mean, just obviously, you know, the Midland Odessa area, as well as we talked about all the dirt in the air there. It took a long time to get that trailer clean and dust free. But, you know, after 3 days in the driveway doing all this stuff, it was time to back it in and store it for now. And so that's kind of it, except for the fact that the Ram 2500 was a disgusting mess too. And I actually pulled the air cleaner on it because I was thinking going through that stuff on the way down there, then being in that environment, down through Big Bend and back again, I was probably chugging a lot of dirt in through that air filter. And I pulled it and I looked, and yeah, sure enough, she really did need to be replaced. So I ordered another one and a cabin filter as well, because I want to give my truck some nice clean air to breathe. So I did, obviously, when I backed the trailer back in, I drained all the water, flushed out the water heater, which I did a short on. Surprisingly, I flushed that water heater pretty often, but this time there was a lot of calcium in there, and I had done like a vinegar cleaning to it, I think like maybe a year and a half ago or a year ago, and I don't know if that just loosened up some stuff, but I would have thought it would have been flushed out before this, but quite a bit of stuff came out. So anyway, that's clean. Lines are drained. So it's really ready if we want to take another trip, or, you know, if at some point we decide, you know, this is it for the year and we're going to winterize it. I think there's probably another trip or two left in her. Would I do this trip again? Absolutely. In fact, I would guess within the next 2 years we'll be back there again. However, I'll bring my impact driver and some triangles, and I'll bring the small screwdriver set along. And when I say small screwdriver set, it's really the tiny screwdrivers that you need to use to, you know, take a thermostat off or whatever. I just didn't have something like that with me. And I definitely bring my impact driver, and I would definitely be more prepared for the weather that's down there, including getting the Reflectix and putting that foil insulation on the windows to cut down on that heat, which was basically brutal. I hope you guys found this, you know, helpful as far as, you know, taking the trip to that area between part one and part two. You know, again, these are my opinions on the campgrounds. You can make up your own opinion, but I enjoyed the trip regardless of the way we went and where we stayed. And I mean, it's a gorgeous area. The Marfa Lights are like incredibly interesting, and Big Bend National Park is something that probably everybody ought to see. Just be prepared. Take all kinds of water with you. Don't chance it. Make sure your vehicle's in really good shape, and you will have a blast. I absolutely guarantee it, and you'll make a lot of memories. All right, so until next time, from all of us here, happy camping.